What does the Bible say about slavery? Let's see. When a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod so hard that the slave dies under his hand, he shall be punished. If, however, the slave survives for a day or two, he is not to be punished, since the slave is his own property. Wow. Pretty bad, right? People don't want to acknowledge that these verses exist, but in this video, I'm going to show you 5 verses in the Bible that not only permits slavery, but justifies the treatment of slaves in deplorable ways. It's critically important to understand the systemic racism that's inherent in Christianity. Many of the verses we're going to look at today were used in history in support of slavery, and books were published on how to teach slaves Christianity so that they would be more submissive, and even slave Bibles were created that omitted much of the Old Testament so that verses that instilled obedience would be highlighted. There are an enormous number of verses that support slavery, but we're going to take a look at 5 right now so that we can understand the systemic racism in Christianity. The first verse we're going to look at permits sex slaves. Exodus 21:7-11 reads, "When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she will not be freed at the end of 6 years as the men are. If she does not please the man who bought her, he may allow her to be bought back again. If the slave owner marries her and then takes another wife, he may not reduce her food or clothing or fail to sleep with her as his wife." Not only does this permit slavery, but it's inherently sexist as well, since men will be freed after 6 years, but the daughter won't. This verse permits a father to sell his daughter as a slave who must please her owner, who can even take her as his wife and have as many as he likes, as long as he continues to sleep with her. The second verse not only permits slavery, but is xenophobic. Leviticus 25:44-46 reads, "However, you may purchase male or female slaves from among the foreigners who live among you. You may also purchase the children of such resident foreigners, including those who have been born in your land. You may treat them as your property, passing them on to your children as a permanent inheritance. You may treat your slaves like this, but the people of Israel, your relatives, must never be treated this way." Here we have clear xenophobia, where it's permitted to make slaves out of foreigners. The ill treatment of foreigners is embedded in the Bible. The verses we've looked at so far have been in the Old Testament, and even though it's a fallacious argument, many Orthodox fundamentalists will say that the Old Testament doesn't apply anymore. Only the New Testament applies. Well then, let's take a look at verses in the New Testament. Every verse that we'll read from here on out will be from the New Testament. The third verse that we're looking at says that slaves should serve their masters just like Jesus Christ. Ephesians 6:5 reads, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ." As you can see, the New Testament is also filled with verses on slavery. In fact, slave Bibles were created that had most of the Old Testament removed and contained primarily the New Testament. Why? Because the Old Testament has verses of extreme violence, and slave owners didn't want them reading anything that might cause them to rebel. In contrast, the New Testament still contains slavery, but it's all about being submissive and obedient. Anthony Schmidt, a curator at Washington, D.C. Museum of the Bible, said, "They're really highlighting portions that would instill obedience." The fourth verse that we're looking at says that slaves should work harder if their master is a Christian. 1 Timothy 6:1-2 says, "Christians who are slaves should give their masters full respect so that the name of God and his teaching will not be shamed. If your master is a Christian, that is no excuse for being disrespectful. You should work all the harder because you are helping another believer by your efforts." Books were actually sold on how to teach black slaves Christianity so that they would be more obedient. Christianity creates a slave morality. A slave morality teaches that obedience, submission, and humility are good traits, while the contrary are bad or sinful. And this can have the effect of creating individuals that are easy to control. The fifth verse that we're looking at says that slaves should serve their masters even if the masters are cruel. 1 Peter 2:18 through 19 reads, "You who are slaves must submit to your masters with all respect. Do what they tell you, not only if they are kind and reasonable, but even if they are cruel. For God is pleased when, conscious of His will, you patiently endure unjust treatment." Here, it even says that God is pleased when slaves endure unjust treatment. Remember, all the verses besides the first two come from the New Testament. Do you see why masters wanted their slaves to be taught the New Testament? In Luke 12:47 through 48, Jesus is giving a parable and says, "And that servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare himself or do according to his will shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know yet committed things deserving of stripes shall be beaten with few. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required, and to whom much has been committed of him, they will ask the more." Though it isn't about slavery directly, in Matthew, Jesus says, "Whoever hits you on the right side of the face, turn so he can hit the other side also. If a person takes you to court to take your shirt, give him your coat also." So according to Jesus, if someone hits you, you shouldn't defend yourself, but let them hit you again instead. Once again, verses like this highlight why the New Testament was taught to slaves. On the topic of Jesus Christ, by the way, it's also blatantly racist that he's depicted as a white man, sometimes even with blonde hair and blue eyes. Jesus Christ was a person of color. Now, in what we've looked at just now, we've only seen a handful of verses, but the Bible is filled with them in both the Old Testament and the New. Now look, I'm not saying that all Christians are automatically racist. Now, of course, that's not true. But what I'm saying is that systemic racism is rife in Orthodox fundamentalist Christianity, and it has been used as a system of oppression throughout history. Remember that according to fundamentalist Christianity, the entirety of the Bible is the perfect, inerrant work of God. That every word in it is infallible, that it's flawless. I urge you to think about how much damage this has done and what it does to the impressionable minds of children who are raised on these stories. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian household, and every one of these verses was read to me. We are here to create a new world with equal opportunity for all, and as we do, it's critical to become aware of those ideologies that have a negative impact on our society and contribute to racism. A lot of people criticize me for opposing the literalist interpretation of Christianity and the Bible. But after what I just read to you, how could you possibly do so? Look, you cannot support equal opportunity for all while at the same time supporting fundamentalist literalist Christianity. In this video, we only looked at slavery, but the Bible is filled with sexism, homophobia, racism, and violence. And these verses are read to young, impressionable minds every day. Is it any wonder that we live in such a divisive and hateful world? It's all around us. There are many more terrible verses in the Bible. So, hey, share them in the comments below. Let people know that they exist. And also, let me know what you think. Share this video everywhere. It's important to get this information out. And check out my video on 100% proof that God doesn't exist. Or you can also watch my story, Growing Up with Religion. Join our War of the Mind by subscribing right now. And a big shout out to all my supporters on Patreon. Support on Patreon and get access to our secret live streams. My name is Morg, and I am Hyperion. Ad Astra, to the stars.